everybody, and welcome back to week 2 of Bridging the Gap with James Purvis and Jeff Kirchick. This is Jeff Kirchick. James, good to see you again. Hope you had a
Likewise.
good weekend. Yeah, and I wanted to get into why are we bridging the gap? Well, at Cresta, we're trying to bridge the performance gap between agents. You have some agents who are top performers, and others who are mediocre performers, and others who are at the lower end of the totem pole, and how can you bridge that gap? So that's where the name comes from. And James, today we're going to talk a little bit about what does the performance gap mean from a business perspective? Like when you're talking to customers in our industry, what do you think resonates with them about why this issue is so important?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think it would be good to just give some context to this. I did some research on just really what the performance gap variance is in most organizations. And there's a really cool study that Indiana University did a while back that's called The Best and the Rest. And what they did is they analyzed over 600,000 participants, and they really determined ultimately that top performers, they produce 3 to 4 times what an average performer does. So if you break that down a bit, it's pretty nuts. So if one person can produce what 4 people can, what would that mean for an organization? So you think of things like costs. So if you look at like a contact center, like you were mentioning, let's say you have 500 sales reps in a contact center, or it could be customer service reps. And the average salary is, let's say, $40,000. That's $20 million in human capital costs annually. So it's a pretty, humans, as folks know out there that lead a team, I mean, that's your most expensive, typically, cost in an organization. And I read this Harvard Business Review article that kind of broke down the performance variance, and they determined that 40% are typically the high performers, another 40% are kind of in that middle, and then there's 20% that are in that below average kind of part of the whole organization. So if the top 40% are producing 3 to 4 times what the bottom are, so imagine what that would mean if you could just get rid of that bottom 20%. So that's 100 people, that's $4 million in cost savings. And then if you get that middle 40% to perform at the highest level, you're basically doubling the total output with 100 less people. So, and then plus on top of that, if you look at like top performers, they're also much happier with their jobs. So there's just a lot that goes into this, is why it's so important. And I look at like what companies are doing to really get people to perform better at a higher level. And I kind of broke it down where I was thinking, I was like, what have I seen in my career, talking to customers, what are they doing? And it's really 3 things mainly, and it's training, coaching, and then maybe there's tools like software tools that they're providing their team. And if you look at like training, this is great. You get your new hire training. Most people, like any job you have, if you're at a bigger company, you come in and it's pretty regimented. One thing I always notice is the trainers of these, when you're at a really big company, they've probably never even been in the role before. Maybe they have, but they're not, you're in sales and you're getting trained by someone who's never done sales. So that's kind of one red flag there. But then there's just cramming everything in your first few days or your week or 2-week training. And scientific research states that people forget 70% of new information within 24 hours. So then you look at like coaching, and the data that we've gathered here at Cresta from our customers is that we found that roughly 50% of managers' time is spent reviewing transcripts. So if you're working 40, 50 hours, you got 20 to 25 hours a week that's spent doing this instead of actually spending it on coaching. So, how effective really is that? And then the tools that are provided, specifically in contact centers, you got things like conversational AI, there's speech analytics. These things I think are more legacy if you look at where the world's going, because it's all post-mortem and it's post-conversation insights. So, things that come to mind there is like, do the reps even review that? And do the managers even have time? You get all this data. how good is it? Another stat I've seen is if you look at like quality assurance of in a contact center, you're only looking at 2 to 3% of the total call volume. So what I think of like a sports analogy, if you had like a basketball coach and you're in a game and they were only there for the first minute or two of the game, how can you adjust as the game progresses and really coach effectively if you're not even seeing everything? So these are just a few things that I thought of that really relate to this really big performance gap that's out there, and it's across every organization. This isn't just specific to a certain industry or a certain company, it's everywhere. So yeah, I'm curious, Jeff, some of the feedback that you have on this.
Yeah, no, I think you hit the nail on the head. I don't want to sound hyperbolic, but as I reflect on, the years I've had working with contact centers, I don't think it's far-fetched to say that all problems are really performance gap problems in the contact center. And if it's not all problems, it's almost all problems. Because you think about key metrics that are being measured. So things like first call resolution, right? The people who are the top performers are doing that at a better clip than the lower performers. Things like CSAT, things like handling calls efficiently, average handle time, right? These are all the acronyms you hear, the KPIs that call center leaders are looking at. And if you could wave a magic wand and suddenly make everybody into your top performers who are crushing these KPIs, obviously those KPIs start to go off the charts, right? So I know that I'm making it sound overly simplistic, and I literally said, waving a magic wand, but I think a lot of times when it comes to artificial intelligence, a lot of what it comes down to is that it's an awareness problem. People aren't aware of the possibilities that exist. If you were to say, hey, Jeff, like, what would be your preferred way to fly to San Francisco for the Cresta QBR in a few weeks? I'd probably say if I could have a flying car, that would be pretty cool. And it's funny that we're actually like kind of getting close to being able to do that, right? Like that's not actually something that's far-fetched, but when we were growing up, you would never think that that was possible. So I think that like when it comes to thinking about AI and its applications and this performance gap, I think that a lot of times people don't realize that there are ways now that you can start to draw on the behaviors of top performers to bridge all of these different gaps. And like I actually had to make a couple customer service calls over the weekend, and to me it's appalling how like even something as simple as data collection is happening manually. I had to spell out my name letter by letter over the phone. I had to ask a very simple question. You would think that they could surface something from the knowledge hub for the agent. That's not what happened. They had to call somebody else, put me on hold for 5 minutes and get back to me. Mind you, this is a Fortune 100 technology company that I was on the phone with, a very innovative company, very simple things the agents don't have at their fingertips. So we have a long way to go as an industry in terms of embracing some of these things. But if we can start to think about what's possible today and how we can embrace it, I think that we can start to bridge that performance gap. And I think that that would solve a lot of those problems. So yeah, what do you think about that?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. It's funny. I actually had a call that I had to make this weekend where I own a couple rental properties, and I called my insurance to cancel because I moved to Austin, Texas, and we sold our home, and I totally forgot to stop my policy and cancel it. So I called to do that, and the call was 42 minutes. I even, just being in the world I live in now, I screenshot it and sent it to my wife, and I'm like, gosh, I wish they had something like Cresta, because the experience was crazy. I called just to cancel that. The lady found that I had my primary residence was one of my rentals. I'm like, no, that's not the case. I would have thought that's something simple. I talked to 3 other people that they kept transferring me because they were different agencies within the big, a really big household name insurance company that I use. And just there was no personalization. Things that you said, when I got transferred, I'm like, how do you not know this? You were telling me that there was an error with the insurance for a rental. You told me that. So I was like, cool, you found something that was personal. And then that all went away. So yeah, it happens all the time. Hopefully we're getting to that point where AI is going to really take off within these service realms, and things like that don't ever happen again. But yeah. So I think overall, I mean, really just everybody who's listening, I'm sure you all got great stories. We'd love to hear them. Actually, it's some of your customer service stories, or maybe even a good scenario too. We want to hear that as well. But there is definitely a gap out there. And if you're seeing it, let us know about it, because it's interesting to hear that. And from a sales and customer service standpoint in the contact center, that's really what Crest is built to do. Our real mission here is to make contact center reps 10 times more effective and really just close that performance gap once and for all.
Awesome. Well, I look forward to seeing what's on the agenda for week 3, James. But this was a great conversation. I look forward to seeing what feedback we get.
Likewise, good to see you as always, Jeff, and we'll catch you next week.
All right, sounds good.
All right, take care, buddy.
You too.
See ya.